Happy Friday. I'm not getting snowed on right now, so I'm the lucky one. My guest, however, is apparently he's in a whiteout condition right now. So, if we talk about cities to live in Canada, no, we won't go there. We won't go there because it'll turn into like a talk about whose hockey team's better, et cetera, et cetera. And I like to make friends here on the show. I'm all about love and making friends. Online today, I've got, and I've been told, get his name right, Eric Pook from Serious Consulting Group. Did I get it? I nailed it. I did it. Okay. Fantastic. Thanks for joining me today. Look you're not even on screen right here. This is stuff that I do before. I didn't,
I love the studio, Mark. The tooth, the virtual tooth, the AI tooth.
Yes, right? It's an AI tooth. It's actually not here. It's all just a complete digital. I'm actually not real either. I'm AI as well. So
I believe that. If I didn't see it at PDC and if we didn't do some great client videos together last time I was in Vancouver, I would have believed that. AI is nuts these days.
Yeah. Hey, it's I think it's one of those conversations that it's on everybody's mind. Like, are you using it in your, like, at any capacity?
So minimally, but there is a ton of that. I mean, luckily we're this hyper specialized business that'll never be Uberized, right? As long as you've got a landlord and a tenant, right, you're going to need someone in between to help, right, communicate and bridge the gap.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's tons of potential. I mean, every day we spend hours even doing some of these initial lease reviews with doctors. And funny enough, whiteouts. We just did a call with some doctors in Whitehorse. Oh. And right, speaking of whiteouts, and it was one of those where we're spending hours doing all the due diligence, right? We look at the doctor, the background, their practice history. We have multiple different software sources. We have our own internal proprietary data using Salesforce.com. We have access to 9.8 billion square feet worth of details across North America, rental rates, vacancies, comp reports, all that sort of stuff. So we do a ton of this stuff many times, even before we've picked up the phone and talked to the doctor, let alone gone through and reviewed their lease. So yeah, I'm starting to play with it a little more, but it's definitely interesting. When I've played with it, it's not quite there yet, but
what have you used? Have you used like ChatGPT? Is that
correct?
Yeah.
ChatGPT 4, and I did the paid subscription, and again, interesting components. But it's also now pretty easy as the business owner. I'm getting all the emails that say, "Hey, Eric, I saw you're leading the healthcare space as it pertains to your website and your LinkedIn, and I noticed this and this and this." And literally, it is a guy.
How many times a day, Eric? How many? I get probably like 10 of those a day. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's all like, oh man. And you know what? It's an effective form of marketing, but it's a numbers game at that point, right? Are we sending relevant information, or are we just kind of like barfing on everyone these days? I don't know. I think it may be, that's why we need to be humans for a little bit longer until we put chips in our brain and, go into the matrix. But until then, I'm in, like, this stuff makes me really nervous, Eric. Like, I'll be honest.
Did you see, speaking of Elon, did you see the chip, Neuralink, the first...
Neuralink.
Yeah,
yes.
The guy was playing chess and Civ 4 on his MacBook Pro.
Yes, like incredible. The latest Andrew Huberman podcast he had another neuroscientist on there, and they were actually studying, because our eyeball is the extension of our brain, right? So this neuroscientist is getting cadavers and studying the cells in the retina as sort of the gateway into the brain, with the idea that eventually, we can engineer a robotic eye that sends images to our brain. That it's just like, what a time we live in, right? What a time we live in. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's. We're arguably already cyborgs with these things.
We are.
So
We are.
right? What's the
As
difference between a little extra Bluetooth connection?
Yeah, and sometimes I just want to cyborg this sucker into the, off the bridge. But anyways, we're like, what a tangent we're going on here. This is awesome. Okay, so let's.
The Joe Rogan side of things, right?
That's right. That's right. That's what the podcast is all about. Let's get all the cutting edge science out of the way, and then we'll dive into the bits. So these topics, Eric, like these topics, I got to be honest. Like I'm so unfamiliar. I do know things like the demolition clause. That's an easy one, an easy go to. Where the heck where do I start? I don't know. Like people have a different entry point. Whether they're renewing, purchasing, etc. Like I'm sure you obviously see this where folks they I can do all this stuff on my own. I'm sure there's lots of examples where folks have gone off down that path and that stepped on landmines, and it turns into the end of the day like possibly into a significant amount of money, or locking them into something that could be detrimental to their business and et cetera. So what do you say to somebody that is like hands-on? They're super intelligent. We're talking about medically trained people here, so they're intelligent people, and saying, Eric, like I got this. I got my lease covered. I've got all the paperwork out. I sat down with my lawyer. It was in 1970, and figured all this stuff out. What are you saying to that guy? What are you saying to him?
Yeah, it's funny. I was at one of the big vendor fairs today and talking to a lot of the reps, and it's funny, especially lately, we've really sort of reshifted the focus of, rather than talking about the lease, arguably, yes, it's a lease, but now, because of the importance, especially on practice values and otherwise, it's really a business contract. And arguably, it's the most expensive contract that the business owner will sign with any entity, and the largest check they will sign to any entity in their personal or professional lives. And they're also the least likely to sign it on the trunk of a car or in between patients, sort of thing, with their eyes closed, doing these lease renewals. So what we're talking about today is the dental office lease, as well as medical office lease, vet office lease, chiropractic office lease, etc. So yeah, Mark, I mean, to answer your question, it is the most expensive contract when you look at the monthly payment multiplied by the annual increase, multiplied by the 26 and a half years that the average dentist is in the same location. And yet it's also the one that they're the least likely to have any sort of professional guidance, or to try to do it themselves, or to sort of say, I'm sure it's fine, or what's the real risk, etc. Mm-hmm.
So what are the common mistakes that, in the beginning stages, what are the common mistakes that they're making?
Common ones, I mean, right from the very beginning, and you saw it from years on the road, seeing all sorts of dental clinics. In many cases, it's using non-dental specific resources. A little bit about us is we were founded 30 years ago in Western Canada. And since then, we've done now 30 years, 13,000 of these medical dental office lease negotiations. And we're the only healthcare specialized tenant advisory and lease negotiation firm of our kind. So what we do see is a lot of people that are using, maybe it's their residential, the one that sold them their house is now helping them to find a commercial real estate space. Or even worse, they're driving around their local neighborhood. They, call the number on the sign of, the local strip mall. And, they're going to that local broker to saying, hey, don't worry, I don't have anybody representing me, right? You can double end it, Mr. Landlord, and thinking that that's actually going to help them out, which in truth, the landlord's agent usually says, hey, you really should have, I'll take the money, but you really should have someone looking out for you, especially that's dental specific. So the biggest, I think, issue for sure is the fact that they're not getting those that are hyper specialized on dental. And that's no different than construction. Someone, Uncle Ed, that does all my cabinetry, right? does not know the ergonomics and flow and what's going to be necessary to align to the beautiful 8-deck operatory that they've built out.
Right. So these are like some of the key points that like, what are like some of the other key points that a dentist should pay attention to when it comes to this stuff?
Yeah, the big one is, there's 6 big insights I'd share. The first is they are the best tenants on the planet. They've got the highest build out cost, $350 per square foot now to build out a new dental clinic. And that's just to get it built, let alone all the equipment and everything else. So highest build out cost, lowest default rates. The likelihood the dentist isn't there after 10 years, right, is less than 1%. The likelihood of a restaurant not being there is over 90%.
Yeah.
Right? So just seeing the leverage, put yourselves in the landlord's shoes. Who would you rather choose? Plus, the dentist is COVID proof, right? They can never work from home, regardless of what the staff says. And in addition to that, they're there in the same place for 26 and a half years, always bringing in high quality foot traffic. So they're really a landlord's dream. Yet, again, they try to do things themselves. On average, we're spending 20, 30, 40, 50 plus hours dealing with all the back and forth with the landlords. And, landlords love to try to deal with the end tenant because most of their franchisees, they have their corporate representative actually doing all the heavy lifting for the landlord. So the first big insight there is just, look, you are the best tenant on the planet. You have a lot more leverage with the landlord. And you want to do that from start to finish. Yes, that's it. More leverage, more sound effects. That's it. It is that you are such a great tenant, yet you're the least likely to use it in terms of sort of a group.
Yeah, that's something important to wield for sure. That like makes a lot of sense to me. I spent 11 years in the food industry. So when you mentioned restaurants, that's absolutely true. When you think in terms of duration, so this, like, on the topic of duration, does that then give them some more, let's look at a longer term and then give you a better rate because of that? Is that some firepower that they have?
Absolutely, right. Landlords are creatures of habit, and of course, they're for a profit-driven, capitalistic-driven entity. Yeah. But they care about 2 things: it's term and rent, as well as redevelopment. But we'll come to that. But term and rent is key. So, of course, right, many landlords are looking to shore up that revenue and signing up for a 5 or 10-year term. And then, especially for the doctor, having 2 5-year options becomes very, very important. And unfortunately, I talked to a doctor yesterday in California, and she thought, okay, great. Well, I want to retire. Maybe I just want to bring my lease down to be month to month. Yet that couldn't be worse, because you're now looking at it. You've got it from a very selfish hat on. You're looking at it from you and just sort of winding down, right? What is so important is to take that hat off and look at it from your buyer's side. Right? The buyer, what are they buying of yours when they purchase your practice for a 6.5 or 6.9 times multiple of EBITDA? What are they buying? They're buying that long-term continuity and predictability of revenue, right? Full stop. So what becomes critically important now is, how do we help to make sure that we're looking at the lease from the eyes of the buyer versus the seller? So in this case, a $1.3 million producing practice, one of the best things is, how do we structure a new 10-year term or even a 5-year term with a 5-year option, et cetera? Because now what's interesting is, across the continent, the landlord, the banks will not issue a long-term loan if there's insufficient term on the lease. Meaning, right, typically, if RBC is going to issue a 12-year term, rule of thumb is they want a 12-year of unencumbered lease, so that really there's nothing in there that can prevent the doctor from being there to pay back that loan over the next 12 years. If it's only 8 years left on the lease, then the bank will typically only issue a payback amortization period of 8 years. Bottom line is, the more term and options, the more continuity of revenue and the more protection the buyer has, which is, only going to help to increase and put a protective force field around those eventual practice sale proceeds.
That's awesome. Yeah, that makes, I don't know, like, what's that movie? Like when it was on the 2008 crash, where they're talking about like blocks of investment, where you have like
the big short.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the dental practice is kind of like that AAA stock then, right?
Yeah. Very, very good analogy, because you're right. They are the ones typically, though they're the ones that paid the rent all on time through COVID, right?
Yeah.
They continue to be open all through COVID. They continue to provide local oral health care, right, in that local community. And still to this day, they're the ones that are selling their practices for the most. So again, one of the best tenants. Also, what I think happened is, in terms of insights, our doctors thought, you know what, I'm successful, I'm profitable. It's almost my penance, it's my penalty for being so successful. Oh, I guess I'll just have to pay my landlord more. So it's almost this feeling of guilt in some cases. But that all shifted with COVID. As soon as people realized, hey, Eddie, my landlord, my golfing buddy, such a nice guy. Well, suddenly, as soon as the pandemic happened, well, Eddie didn't pick up the phone. And suddenly this shift from doctors that said, well, why am I paying my lease if I'm shut down? That's not fair. Wait a second. Where the heck is that lease in that drawer from 1986? And wait a second. Maybe I should have read it, and I should have really understood.
Man, the power that a piece of paper has. Hey, like it's so important. So like, how are you accessing fair market value then? Like, what tools are you using? Like, how do you discern that?
Yeah, I've got some great ones. I could actually do some live examples, but ultimately, we pay for license data. So we have two sources. We have our own internal data of all the other dental deals we've done throughout the Lower Mainland in BC to, Whitehorse, literally, as well as, Winnipeg to Halifax to St. John to Honolulu to Key West and even Anchorage, we're doing a deal in right now. So it's one of those where we have our own internal data, which is great because that's other dental deals in the area, in the building or close by. And then we have license data, which is incredibly expensive, right? In the tens of thousands of dollars. But what it does is allows us the opportunity to see rental rates, vacancies, comp reports, even demographics. And in some cases, what the other tenants are paying in the building. So it makes sure that as we're approaching the landlord, we can come with this swath of data to help make sure that, hey, look, we might be born at night, just not last night. And we want to make sure that we can justify it with whatever leasing manager that is to make sure that we're paying ourselves fair and effective market rents. And more importantly, getting the best value for the fantastic tenancy that dentist has been. So, that mid-career dentist who just thinks, oh, I've got a 20-year term. Well, you don't. You've got a 10-year term and then 2 5-year options. But if you miss that, most doctors don't realize it's at least 12 months or 6 months prior to your lease expiry. You've got to send them written notice, or else those 2 5-year options become null and void.
Yeah.
It's one of those, they don't realize that in renewing that lease every 5 years, that's a perfect opportunity to hit the reset button and suddenly now structure a net new 5-year term, or to, quite frankly, a lot of clients were suggesting don't exercise your option. Start the process 2 years prior to your expiry, because these days it's 18 to 24 months to pick up and relocate a clinic, right? So in many cases, we're suggesting start the process early. Don't just renew an option. Start a new 5-year term or 10-year term and keep those 2 5-year options for the buyer. Right. So it's always giving that sort of that thought of what's your exit. And based on the massive prices still, right? Here we are into mid 2024, still driving massive value. So the more we can do long before they're eventually putting the for sale sign on the clinic, can make the difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars in value.
And I'm sure you guys have a robust scheduling system where you're reaching out to the clients and telling them when it's time to start these processes. I can see like a lot of things being missed when it comes to like pulling out the drawer and pulling the piece of paper out and going, wait a minute. Yeah, I really don't understand all this stuff, right? So, like, what does that turn into dollar-wise? Give me a horror story example of somebody that there was a miss, and what did that turn into? Like even maybe something that affected them to a point where they couldn't practice. Like you must hear horror stories out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but we, being that we are, the only real firm of our kind like this, we do get the phone calls when the proverbial crap hits the fan. So, devastating example. This was a doctor who was roughly 43 years of age, had built out a beautiful 6 operatory practice. And in essence, 3 weeks prior to the grand opening, had died of a heart attack. So, you've got this new doctor, young family, and unfortunately didn't have any provisions in the lease to protect them. And what is in it, almost 99.9% of all leases, it's binding to the successors and heirs. So, Mark, you've been in the space long enough, fully built out dental clinic, no doctor, no patients, right? How much is that clinic worth?
Yeah, that just that gives me a panic attack. Yeah, that's what I can't imagine being in the situation. It would be terrifying.
Yeah, so it sort of gets worse because now, not only, and some doctors say, oh, I have life insurance and that's what it's for. Well, sure, but don't forget, the bank just comes after the life insurance, so they're made whole. But suddenly then the landlord went back to the spouse and said, unfortunately, Mrs. Smith, you're now responsible for the roughly $9,000 a month, increasing at 4% per year for the remaining 9.5 years on the lease.
Right.
Right. So suddenly now, why do we want even a penny of the life insurance to go towards the rent?
Right.
And yeah, it was a devastating example where we had to suddenly now try to find someone to assign the lease. Right. And then the estate is still liable years later because of the fact of, there was no one really properly negotiating that lease. Had we been involved early and often into that process, we would have added something called the dental specific death and disability clause. Heaven forbid that doctor passes away, then it's something we created, 30 odd years ago, which was, in essence, if you can no longer, you might not be disabled, but certainly like my godfather took a divot to his rotator cuff, right? Or sliced his finger, etc. You might not be disabled, but certainly you're not practicing wet finger dentistry.
Right.
So one of the big components there was, you want to have the exit. You want to have a termination right, that because the dental industry is so unique, if you die, right, you should at least have the opportunity, or your state, to either A, terminate the lease and walk away in 3 months or whatever that may be, or more importantly, because as we just touched on, the bank won't issue the long-term loan unless there's renewals, etc., then at least you should be able to renew the lease in preparation for sale. So you've got that continuity of revenue, right, to help ensure that we put that sort of force field around your eventual practice sale proceeds.
What what a great tip. Like what other risks would you encourage dentists to look into, associated with the lease, and like what would you do to help mitigate those risks?
So I'll give you 5, right? 5 critical questions to ask and be aware of, to your listeners. Number 1 is how can you proactively protect yourselves from the following? The big ones are, landlord's right to termination. And that can be through relocation, demolition, or a whole cornucopia of other components in the lease that can cause the doctor to lose their options or be kicked out early, which can be devastating because, look, you're not a pharmacist that can walk across the street and do the midnight run. As you know, it could be 18 months to relocate the clinic. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, how do you build your professional team to have someone that's not just 100% commission driven and being paid for by the landlord, as the average real estate broker is, right? But someone that can help to ensure that the landlord isn't entitled to things like a percentage of practice sale proceeds that we're seeing more and more often these days across the board. Some landlords are actually putting it into the language that they want to be compensated. When the doctor sells their clinic, they want to collect a percentage because, hey, what's your clinic worth without my keys, right? Number three, I would say good questions to ask are, do you know if you have a personal or spousal guarantee within your existing lease today? And more importantly, what are the strategies to help get that removed, right? So at least it's just your corporation and it removes some of those extra hooks that the landlord has into you. In addition to that, number four is, what are the key things within your lease or hidden within your lease that could have the landlord prevent you from selling your practice? Most doctors don't realize that within their lease today, they cannot sell their clinic without the landlord's prior permission and written consent. And it's all too often that too late in the game, the landlord finds out after the whole close, buy, sell goes, and the landlord says, nah, I don't think so. Right? And in some cases, the landlord can actually terminate the lease just in exchange for the doctor asking to sell their clinic and therefore transferring their lease. And then number five is, again, to know the strategies and what the fifth question to ask is, what are the strategies to help negotiate or renegotiate those leases? So that's sort of the five questions to ask. How do you mitigate against those? Well, first step is knowing, right? Knowing what is hidden in your lease. And that, unless you know what you're looking for, it can be very difficult to do so, right? We know top resources in the country that will miss certain components because we've just seen it for too long. So that's number one. Number two is how it's positioned, right? And what we've figured out the hard way over 13 years is how to explain the uniqueness of a dental tenant to the landlord, right? How to create the reputation in the market that, we get hired on a flat rate. So the landlords know that we don't go away. They know that we're focusing on a lot of these qualitative type of components, right, through the original proposals and letters of intent with the landlord. And most importantly, to ensure that we've got a carefully choreographed game of chess, and we're thinking about, even before we picked up the phone, exactly what we want to accomplish and where we want to end up by the very end. And that's by thinking about, look, what's most important, doctor, right? I want to remove my personal guarantee. I want to ensure my landlord, can't kick me out just for asking to sell my clinic. I don't want to be liable even after I sell my clinic. I want to ensure that I don't have to return it to pre-dental condition if I want to move down the road into a building that I own. At the same time, I want to make sure that I know what my must-haves are as well as my nice-to-haves. Mark, I'd love to be the only endodontist in the space. I'd like to be the only GP, or I'd like to make sure that there's only 2 GPs in this whole big strip mall. Those sorts of things are key, as well as, hey, I'd love to be able to bring in associates and have associates clauses, which is a thing. And then also thirdly is, what are the things I'm willing to concede in order to help accomplish my must-haves?
Right.
And then just peeling the onion a little bit further is, what happens when the landlord says no? Right. So all too often the doctor says, okay, hey, I watched a Mark's great podcast and DentalBytes, and hey, Mr. Landlord, I want to remove my personal guarantee. And the landlord says, no. And you say, okay, thanks.
Then what?
So it's one of those, it's these step downs, and it's only because we've already thought the 27 chess moves ahead. But if the landlord says no, well, there's another dozen different step downs and different ways that we've done over the years to help minimize it, find that middle ground, and to make sure that we really try to understand what the landlord's looking for. And then more importantly, how we can help to dramatically reduce and improve that lease. Because look, the landlords are the lord of the land, the world's oldest, maybe second oldest profession.
Yeah.
And of course, they found a way to make these lease agreements to be absolutely locked in, to be almost entirely landlord friendly. So all we're trying to do is just balance out, right, that teeter-totter, so it doesn't feel like the doctor's legs are in the air and that they're completely left out in left field.
Is like province to province, it's different, but is there any point where the province jumps in to help negotiate some of these things? Like, is that, or not at all? It's the wiggle eye thing.
Yeah, that's a good misconception. I remember doing a CE course in Denver,
Yeah.
and there was some a salty endodontist in the back,
Oh no,
and
salty.
he had
Those
already been
salty
forced,
endodontists at that. Yeah.
and he was forced to relocate already. And I remember
Yeah.
these two young associates that worked for one of the big DSOs in the U.S. And I'm going through some of these examples right on the screen, and we're going through the analysis and whatnot. And the young doctor looks up and says, "No, the landlord can't do that. That's not fair."
Hmm.
And in comes the salty endodontist in the back that says, Lassie, you don't know what the landlord can do."
You're
And
right.
I don't know what it is. It's just this notion that, oh well, that's unfair, or oh, you know what, the lease that I have with my residential condo or my apartment building, well, there's all these rules and regulations and protections and tenant rights, etc.
Not so much, eh?
But with two commercial businesses, right, we're
Yep.
just talking about the piece of paper between the two of them.
Right.
So, it really is an eye opening perspective that, look, these landlords don't place crowns. They don't remove impacted thirds, right? They're not. They're not doing advanced endodontic procedures. All they're doing all day and every day is just negotiating leases.
Well,
So
hey, there might be some landlords that do, right?
true. And we've worked with many doctors that have now become
There you go.
landlords.
That's yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it's those key pieces that it's all these things. If the landlord wants you to walk in with a purple hat and hopping in on one leg, and they put it in the lease, that's your requirement.
That sounds pretty
So,
legit. Yeah, yeah. It's
right,
usually a blue leg I've seen, but yeah. Anyways,
yeah.
could you explain the significance of tenant improvement allowances?
Yeah, TI or TIA. I sort of refer to it in my CE courses almost like a bit of fool's gold. So it sounds great, and quite frankly, it can be great. In essence, the intent behind it is, hey, look, I'm a new tenant, I'm a doctor, I'm opening up a brand new clinic. And Mr. Landlord, all it is 4 gray walls right now of concrete. So now you're asking me as the doctor to build out at $350 per square foot. Every bolt, every piece of sheet metal, every piece of particle board, every piece of drywall, every wire, plumbing, electrical, etc., now becomes immediately the asset of the landlord. So, in essence, the premise behind it is, hey, look, I'm incurring massive costs here. Right? What's in it for me, Mr. Landlord, and what can you do to pay me as the tenant? However, right, the big misnomer is the banks are not, the landlords are not in the lending business. And quite frankly, most of them obviously want to increase their face rate or the amount per square foot. So if they need to throw in some extra cash for a brand new building, that's great. But for most, it's built into the base rent or the annual increase, right? Or different common area maintenance fees or the term of the lease. So in essence, I'm a big believer in saying, look, well, great. The landlord's going to give us $100 per square foot. The pro formas we can create with our neat software can show, okay, great. That's $1 million over the next 10 years. Now, hypothetically, what if we reduce that base rent? Or what if we reduce that tenant improvement allowance from 100 grand to 50 grand or 20 grand, right? How much less will that reduce rent and annual increases over the next 10, 15, 20 years? And it's staggering. So in many cases, we can look at the financials both from the tenant side as well as the landlord side and see the same numbers the landlords have. So tenant improvement allowance can be great, but you always want to dial up and dial down each valve. There's 7 main financial variables. You've got base rent, you've got annual increase, you've got common area maintenance, which is negotiable. You've got base rent, annual increases, common area maintenance, fixturing, right? Free rent, tenant improvement allowance, and landlord work. So these 7 main financial variables, each one plus other inducements can be sort of dialed up and dialed down and dialed up. And where do you want to see the maximum return hey, are you looking to flip the practice in the next 5 years? Okay. Are you looking to retire in the next two? Right? What's going to be most important to you, and make sure that the lease is aligned to that. So yeah, tenant improvement allowance is just one of those main financial variables that don't get stuck with thinking it's going to be this big, massive check, when in actuality, you might be better off going down the street to get, one of the big banks to give you the loan. And then you know exactly how you're paying it off, exactly when you're paying it off. And quite frankly, what happens is, doctors don't realize it, but you're signing a 10-year term plus the 2 5-year options. What it'll say in the fine print is, well, the lease is going to be even more, right? So at year 11, it's going to be then at the then current rate or 10% more than what they're already paying today, never less. So again, the doctor's on this sort of world's most boring roller coaster that keeps going up and up and up, right? And they're locked into this 20 years of increase.
Yeah.
So we helped a doctor in California the other day cut her rent in half, because that original doctor took a whole whack of money, ended up paying dramatically higher than market rent. And of course, it kept going up by 4% per year. Now, 15, 20 years later, astronomical, almost 20% of her revenue is going towards the silly tenancy expense.
Jeez. Man, oh man. Yeah, that's crazy. So how are you now? How is everybody staying friends after all this? Like, nobody feels like they're getting the worst end of the deal, the lord of the land, as you put it, and dentists. How does everybody remain friends after this all? What's the approach?
Well, first of all, it's a big misconception that, geez, if I bring in help, right, suddenly that's going to impact the relationship with my landlord. Quite frankly, the couldn't be further from the truth. The opposite is true. By bringing someone in to be very objective, to use lots of third-party examples, and to help convey the needs of the doctor without the emotion being involved, makes things so much easier. It becomes far more difficult, and landlords can use it to their advantage to add some pressure and throw in some emotion, etc., where the doctor feels that sort of they're getting stuck. That's number one. Number two is landlords in some cases refer clients to us, because the doctor is just sort of unaware of how the process works, what's reasonable versus what's unreasonable, right? What are the usual course of action? And look, most landlords love to get the phone call. We say, look, we're serious. The doctor's hired us to help advise them and help to ensure that we've got a long-term pro forma looking at their total financials. They're contemplating some investments, or they're contemplating potentially expanding or relocating, etc. And, look, we're not charging any commissions. We've been hired directly by the doctor to help advise them through the business process. And right, we'd like to find out what you're thinking of and make to propose what you're now looking at over the next 5, 10, 15 plus years. So that's usually, again, music to the landlord's ears, because, again, they just want term and rent.
Right.
So, right, to have someone, first of all, they're used to doing it, right? You look at 3/4 of the tenants out there, especially those with franchisees, the first thing they'll tell you when you buy a XYZ franchise is, hey, incorporate. And number two, don't deal directly with your landlord, right? Have our corporate team help you out, because we do it all day, and don't go into the lion's den without help. So those are the types of things that we want to encourage, especially the individual practitioners, is look, there's help out there, and don't feel like you're going into the lion's den without any, resources or help.
That makes so much sense to me from the landlord's perspective. But I could just see, let's put healthy, good businesses in place over long term. It just makes tons of sense. Give me some examples now. Like, there must be something recently or in the past that you're so proud that you've helped this individual out, and they're in a better off place. I'm sure. Well, that's what you do all day long, but there must be some particular stories that kind of stand out to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's an example. This is one where we're not able to help. It's sort of too late as we look at it. So I've actually got a little slide that looks at practice values and how a lot of the top practice brokers are looking at and evaluating on practices. So this was a situation here. Numbers are different, doctors different, etc. But the core piece here is now landlords are waking up to the value of these dental clinics, and the fact that they're selling for 6 times EBITDA earnings multiples is incredible. And landlords are realizing, hey, you're cashing out, and this is my foot traffic, right? What's your clinic worth without my keys? So one of the key pieces here that one of the top brokerages is doing as part of their valuation is looking at, number one, what are the risks within the lease from the buyer's perspective? And if there's anything there, just like the banks look at, if there's anything in there that can prevent the buyer from getting financing or being able to stay is key. If you pull that back up, it's a neat one, because literally here's a doctor that with a clean lease, meaning, a 10-year term, 2 5-year options without demolitions, relocations, or anything that's going to dramatically impact the buyer's ability to secure a long-term lease, would be worth $1.906 million. $1 million producing practice, $300,000 of EBITDA, 6.2, $1.9 million. However, unfortunately, this doctor had signed a 15-year term and now is stuck with the situation where there's this ticking time bomb in there, which is this termination right? A demolition, relocation, etc. So much so that now the brokerage now has to say, hey, look, we have to factor in the financial risk to the buyer that they pay the $1.x million for your clinic. But if the next day they get the brown envelope on the door and they got to move across the street for another 350 grand, right? Well, we've got to factor that in. So literally, because of the fact that hidden, and it didn't even say demolition, it said substantially renovate or something like that. Right? But it was enough that it would cause the doctor to be forced to move. It was a $525,000 difference between what it could have been with a nice clean lease, but now, right, it's now locked in at, and that now it's taken almost a $500,000 hit, all because of one little clause in Article 76, subsection 2, right, that basically states that the landlord, with as little as 3 months worth of notice, can exercise their right to demolish, right, or relocate the clinic, right, with no recourse really from the doctor. And don't worry, the landlord's going to cover 100% of the build-out cost to move you up to a maximum of 3 months worth of rent.
Crazy, yeah.
So those are just some of talk about return on investment. It is becoming a much bigger concern. So how do you fix it? Well, first of all, create, and we're doing a ton of just screaming from the rooftops now, is to create that sort of 10-year roadmap to a profitable practice sale. The more that you do today to help design that lease around your buyer, you don't just want to exercise that next 5-year option, because if you want to sell in 5 years, what do you have left? Right now, you've got to rely on that landlord that, heaven forbid, if they pass away or it goes to their kids or they sell it to some developer, you're out. Right. And you've just watched hundreds of thousands of dollars get flushed down the drain.
Yeah. That's just this stuff. I'll be honest. It gives me anxiety. It really does. I don't see why folks would not work with you, Eric, and the things that you do. It's a difference maker for sure to just, and I'll refer to the video that we just put together for Key Dental, just giving the doctor just the peace of mind that he just had to worry about doing his dentistry at the end of the day. Like, that's awesome. That's a great testimony to alleviate somebody of the stress that's involved with all this paperwork. What are some strategies that, an effective plan that dentists can put into place, like in bringing in associates or selling, within the framework of the lease? What are some things that they can look at doing?
Yeah, and back to Key Dental, I mean, what a great example of a situation where, the doctor came to one of our courses we did at the PDC a while back. remembered that there's a company like ours that exists, ended up being in a situation where he had to relocate because of a pending future redevelopment. And realized he needed the help. So we handled all that communication with the landlord. We helped to ensure that we advised him on every step of the renewal and racked up, dozens and dozens of hours to help make sure that, every I was dotted, T's was crossed. And we had a very clear plan for him across the board to make sure that it was a great success story. And look, you guys did an amazing video. Hopefully we can add that to this, because, you were in next day doing an incredible filming job and creating a lot of the marketing for that, which was brilliant. And it was just part of telling the story, which is, look, I'm a dentist. I'm here to fix people's teeth. Yeah. And as it comes down to what to ask for, when to ask for, what's reasonable, what's not, what the heck does this mean? And is it fair? Is it reasonable? And ultimately, as he said it best, it was just the peace of mind, knowing that he had someone on his shoulder to help say, this is reasonable, this is unreasonable, here's what to ask for, here's what to not ask for, and here's how to navigate through that. Helped to make sure that he felt 100 times better and could focus more on the design and the layout. And, Sinclair did a fantastic job there.
I like how you referred to you as a leasing coach too. I liked that. Is that how you define? Is that, how you're portraying yourself? Are you a coach, consultant?
I like it's funny, right? Some of our legal and leasing team, they joke and they say, oh yeah, I'm part psychologist, right? I'm part business advisor. I'm confidant. I'm part, sounding board, etc. I'm part business advisor, right? I'm etc. Coach, coach is one thing, but I think, that creates this sort of hierarchy. I like to say, look, we're in it with you as we're in the trenches, right? We're treating it as if it was our own practice with our own money. So I like to say that we're, arm in arm with you, right? We're digging through the trenches, right? We're crawling under the barbed wire together, and we've got the bullets flying over our heads. And look, we wear, the stress and focus of all these dates and timelines. And we're the one actively following up to make sure that, we don't get hit, or that you don't get hit as we're getting you from part A to part B. It's almost the Saving Private Ryan type of analogy, right? But we want to leverage the whole, right? The whole 30 years worth of experience to help get you across the front lines and safely, right, into what is and should be a rock solid concrete foundation to build your business upon, versus a crumbling shell that can cost, tens if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix down the road.
Yeah. Eric, this has been awesome. Like, I haven't been contributing nothing, like zero information here. You're like, the level of knowledge that you have in this arena is unbelievable. What are you doing to stay informed? What are you doing to keep up with the latest trends? Which magazines are you reading? Which Facebook groups are you subscribed to? Where do you draw from all of your information?
Yeah, it's a great piece. I mean, first of all, I'm a big believer in very flat organizations. So, and when you're the owner of the business, you get to choose what you want to do. So the best part of my day are being in market, in clinics, right? Talking to doctors. So the first is firsthand. There's no better information to find out, right? Dr. Chen in Los Angeles, California is going through this issue, and here's exactly what their landlord's doing to them today, right? So that's the first piece. The second is staying very close to our team as each of these files go through. What's working? What are the trends? What are we seeing now from landlords? What's the buying habits from a lot of our clients, right? So for the hundreds of these deals we do per year, part of it now becomes to, what are we seeing? And typically we see, things duck and weave in the wind long before they get published or updated, etc. So we tend to be the ones that are doing a lot of these blog posts and CE courses, etc., to share, look, here's what we're seeing today. And through COVID and 2020, 2021, 2022, these were some of our best years because doctors were just coming on in droves to saying, my God, I can't believe what...
Everybody had time for these things at that point, right? Like
exactly.
I think it was a big time for everybody to just sort of like look at their full business,
Correct. Correct. And to ensure that it's designed for the future. And
Yeah.
now everybody's back and stress is up and suicides are up. It's sort of a
Yeah.
devastating example the other day,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
and part of that is just because, in my opinion, there's a feeling of overwhelmment. And look,
Yeah.
I'm here to focus on great clinical care, and suddenly I get blindsided with right some business issue or some lawsuit or some patient doing a 1-star business review, or the landlord now is giving me a hard time.
Yeah.
All these sorts of components. So I'm doing an upcoming course in Las Vegas at Thrive Live in May to really start, look, I'm a big believer in Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Speaking of one book that's old and new again, there's also a lesser known book, which is How to, Stop Worrying and Start Living. So we actually go through some of those concepts as it pertains to the practice and how to be prepared, how to live in date-type compartments, how to properly understand the issue, assume the worst case scenario, and then improve from there. So literally we cover 4 or 5 of those key topics through one of these CEs. And, so that's another core resource. And then of course, there's all the real estate data we have. There's analysts in each major market. So there's little summaries that I review very often to see. I was just on with the Baltimore team recently with Henry Schein. And, I went through and said, look, this is now one of the 5 of the largest markets in the US. Baltimore had their vacancy rates were as high as they were back in 1999. So they were the sort of the worst off, which gave even more leverage to all the local dental tenants there. The Globe and Mail wrote a great article that it's the best time to be a tenant since 1994, especially downtown Toronto, et cetera, when you're floor 8, right, of a downtown building, right? Then there's vacancies all over the place. Well, that's a great time the landlord would love to secure. So those are just some. And then, of course, it's the Apple blogs and the Tesla blogs that, keep me or the mental bubble gum.
Mental bubble gum. I love it. I'm in the boat. Like if I was a GP or a practice owner, you talk about, having a healthy frame of mind. This word resonates with me is ease. If you can ensure ease in anything that you do in life, I think that's the name of the game. And having somebody like yourself in the corner that provides ease, like that is that's, these are things that keep people up at night, right? So is there anything else top of mind right now that you want to share?
Yeah, I think the first is, speaking of that ease and peace of mind, it's, today is not to be alarmist and negative or otherwise. It's just to know, right? Just have the facts, understand what's in it.
Yeah.
And, the other big piece is just get a second opinion. I got a guy that does all my leases, right? My sisters are, a great corporate lawyer. Fantastic. Great. Right. Just again, just for fun, have us look through that lease. And, there might be a couple of key components that could be, right, a significant detriment to the type of dentistry that you want to do. Maybe there's, for example, another tenant in the building that has exclusivity over orthodontistry, right? And suddenly you wanted to do 25% of your production based on phase 1, phase 2, or Invisalign. So there's all these sorts of weird components, or hey, I want to bring in an OMS once a month, or I want to bring in an endodontist once a week, right? But hang on a second, the landlord says you're bringing in, right, Dr. Jane Smith, Endodontic PLLC, to come in and work, and they're doing a revenue share, or even worse, they're paying you $2,000 a month to use your operatories, right? Well, hang on a second, now it's an unapproved sublet. Now you've put yourself into risk that either A, the landlord could hold you in default, or B, increase your rent because now you're bringing in outside entities to literally increase the revenue to your building and to your business. And the landlord says, no, that's my money. No different than back in the 80s and 90s when they used to do those cigarette machines and, the vending machines in the individual offices. And the landlord said, no way are you getting an extra $500 a month to lease out my space, right? And make money from that extra square footage. So not to compare an oral maxillofacial surgeon to a cigarette machine, but you get my point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh no.
Awesome.
Lastly, is look, what I would add on that is, right? Bet you never heard that example.
No, I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
That's going to be like the like the sequence that sells this
Yeah.
event.
What was that great book? Oh God, it's on the tip of my tongue. It was comparing all these sumo wrestlers to teachers in the Southeast, and it's on the tip of my tongue. Right? It's got it's got an apple in the cover, and it cuts in, and it's an orange in between. Right on the top of my tongue. Anyways, these are key. I think to leave things off, look, if this is a concern for anybody, if they'd like to have their lease reviewed, for any of your listeners, I mean, Mark, look, you guys, it's a lot of work that you guys do to put these things on, and it's a lot of value to your listeners. What we're happy to do is to waive our $2,000 fee for a critical dates and risk analysis. There's a little flyer there that I just sent to you. And what we're happy to do is basically just to know what's hidden in your lease. We'll do the rental rates, we'll do the vacancies, all these sorts of components, and share the data, right? 54% of dentists have leases and they're overpaying, right? 80% have leases that can prevent them from selling their clinic. But what we want to do here is to, look, no cost, no commitment, just ensure that what is hidden within your lease. And what we'll do is basically help ensure that we go through your lease and some of the major components of it. We'll also come back and make sure that we do look at the rental rates and the vacancies and the comp reports. So if we can provide a link in the show notes. We can also email us at the info@cirrusconsultinggroup.com. INFO, Cirrus is like the cloud, CIRRUS consultinggroup.com. And we can definitely then help to make sure that at least what's in your lease. And then look, we can also have some fun and talk about a negotiation treatment plan and when you're thinking of transitioning and what are some ways and things you can do today to maximize those practice sale proceeds and have a great conversation about your business. And if you haven't shared with someone about your goals and transition plans and who are you going to sell to? Is it to your associate? Are you sharing assets? Are you sharing shares? What are the things you're doing today in order to ensure that the lease becomes really a benefit or an asset to the sale of your clinic, right? Versus something that could be a significant risk.
Beautiful. Awesome. That's all I got. We went down the whole list of questions, Eric.
Perfect. Well, we wanted to be short and sweet and to the point, and I'm just getting started. As you can tell, pretty passionate about it.
Yeah, you are. It's awesome. I commend you on just how knowledgeable you are and up to date, and I can see, just you're an asset to these folks. So to get a hold of you personally, again, let's just I want to go over that. I want to make sure that everybody knows how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, for sure. So direct cell is 647-789-3255. That'll ring through the office line and through to the shoe phone, which is attached 24/7 to the chagrin of my 6 and 3-year-old. But the joys of being in the business, because again, doctors wake up Sunday morning and say, when the heck is that lease due again? Oh yeah, shoot. And suddenly, before you know it, you're now saying, oh my God, I need to call somebody. So we're known for picking up the phone with those code reds morning, noon, and night, as my wife is hovering around here somewhere. Hit me in the back of the head. But 647-789-3255 or info@cirrusconsultinggroup.com. Which is on the bottom of those flyers. We'll include that all in the show notes. And it's cirrusconsultinggroup.com is a great resource here where you can see other doctors in your area. There's some great blog posts that talk about all the different situations. Look, I'm a young doctor that's buying or building my first clinic, and I don't know what I don't know, right? I'm a mid-career doctor that is thinking of renewing my lease or expanding or renovating. Right? If you're about to invest in 6 or 7 new chairs or otherwise, don't do any of that without looking at when your lease is. You might even have the landlord be able to kick in some money for some of those leasehold improvements, as I mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many different avenues. Or even worse, let's say you do a bunch of renovations. If you don't tell the landlord, then you're in default of your lease, and that could be an issue, right? Or if you do tell the landlord and they know that you're spending, right, $100,000 on renovations and your lease is coming due in the next 3 or 4 years, well, what do you think the landlord's going to do when your lease is up for renewal? Right? They're going to laugh and say, you're not going anywhere. You just spent $100,000. Here's a 20% increase. Congratulations.
Right. Right.
When they miss the opportunity to potentially say, hey, look, I don't want to invest $100,000 unless I know I've got a new long-term lease with options. So it's these sort of basics that just, doesn't come across or doesn't become top of mind for the doctor. So we just want to be there with them as early as possible to help give them some guidance and make sure that, look, the lease should be the least of their concerns, and lock it in.
Beauty, man. Beauty. Thank you so much for your time, Eric. This has been awesome. I'll let you get to it. You got, your 2 sons to get to. It's the weekend. This is.
I got 2 leases to review and
never mind. I'll let you get back to work then. Yeah.
Mark, you greatly appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me on. This is tons of fun. Happy to get on and talk about cybernetics and Bluetooth enabled devices from Neuralinks, and
that'll be number 2. I'll be able to contribute more to that conversation. I'll be honest, but yeah, we should absolutely do this again. And thanks again for your time, sir.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on. Thanks everybody.